remember exactly what it feels like to hear that a band you love has done something irreversible. Not broken up in the slow, sad way bands sometimes do. Something worse. A meeting, a vote, a sentence in a parking lot. And after that conversation, the music that came after never sounded quite the same. You already know this feeling, and if you love rock the way I love rock, it has happened to you more than once. This is 10 of the worst times that ever happened to some of the best bands in history. Number 10, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I want to start with a band that destroyed itself in a way that I find almost unbearable. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so close to mundane. No riots, no overdoses, no legendary onstage meltdown. Just a meeting, and a proposal, and a man who may have known exactly what he was doing. Here is the thing about Creedence Clearwater Revival that nobody talks about enough. From 1968 to 1970, John Fogerty wrote everything, produced everything, sang everything. Bayou Country, Green River, Cosmos Factory, 6 albums in 3 years. And I know you know this music. Even people who could not name a single CCR song know Proud Mary. Even people who have never heard of John Fogerty have heard Have You Ever Seen the Rain? But backstage, bassist Stu Cook and drummer Doug Clifford wanted more. More creative input, more voice, more of something. And in 1971, after Tom Fogerty had already walked out of the band over the same issue, John Fogerty's answer to the remaining 2 was, "Fine. You want to share? You write a third of the next album." Here is the part that still gets me. Whether that was Fogerty's genuine response to their request, or, as Cook and Clifford later claimed, an ultimatum designed to set them up to fail, nobody has ever agreed. To this day. But what everybody agrees on is what happened when Mardi Gras came out in April 1972. Rolling Stone's John Landau wrote that it was, relative to a group's established level of performance, the worst album he had ever heard from a major rock band. Fogerty himself later said he would not even count it. In October of 1972, 6 months after the record's release, Creedence Clearwater Revival was over. One meeting, one proposal. Cook and Clifford believe Fogerty wanted out and was looking for an excuse. Fogerty says they demanded it. The band never resolved the question, or their feelings about each other. The surviving members did not perform together again for decades. And if you have ever gone looking for the original version of something you love, and found a ghost instead, you know exactly what listening to Mardi Gras feels like. Number 9. Yes, I need to tell you something about this one that I love. And I mean genuinely love, even though the story should not work. And it almost did not. And then it did. And then everything collapsed. Yes formed in 1969. And spent the next decade becoming one of the most ambitious progressive rock bands in the history of music. Fragile, Close to the Edge, Roundabout. These were not songs, they were events. John Anderson's voice was not quite a human voice. It was something that existed in a frequency nobody else could find. And Rick Wakeman at the keyboards, in the cape, behind a wall of synthesizers, playing like he was conducting the weather. That was Yes in their prime. In early 1980, the band reconvened in Paris to record a follow-up to Tormato, and everything fell apart in the sessions. Anderson and Wakeman were unhappy, with the direction, with the finances, with the whole thing. At some point in those failed recording sessions in Paris and then London, according to Wakeman himself, he and Anderson sat together at a bar and started crying. Anderson reportedly said, "This is not the band I love anymore." And Wakeman said, "I'm with you, John." And they walked. Both of them. March 1980. So the remaining three, guitarist Steve Howe, bassist Chris Squire, drummer Alan White, kept rehearsing in a studio in London, and next door, also rehearsing, was another band, the Buggles, Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes. The duo who wrote Video Killed the Radio Star, which in August 1981 would become the very first video ever played on MTV. They had the same manager as Yes, and they were rehearsing next door. And at some point, one room started bleeding into the other, and what came out was drama. August 1980. A Yes album with no John Anderson, no Rick Wakeman, and somehow, and this genuinely surprised me when I found it, Drama reached #2 in the UK. It was not a disaster. It was by several accounts a genuinely excellent record. But it was not what fans wanted. British audiences chanted for John to come back. And after the Drama tour ended, the band dissolved. Horn went on to become one of the most celebrated record producers in the world. Downes went on to form Asia, and the classic lineup of one of the most important progressive rock bands ever assembled, gone. There is something I want to mention here, and I will come back to it. There is a band coming up on this list where one person made a very specific solo move. Not a full departure, something smaller, just a 4-song side project. And it turned out to be the thing that started everything unraveling. We will get there, and when we do, I think you will understand why I brought it up now. Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story. Number 8. The Eagles. Picture this. July 31st, 1980. Long Beach Arena, California. The Eagles. Hotel California-era Eagles, the biggest American rock band in the world, are on stage playing a benefit concert for a senator named Alan Cranston. That at least one of them had never heard of before that evening. And somewhere in the middle of Best of My Love, guitarist Don Felder looks back at Glenn Frey and says, and I am telling you this is an exact quote, "Only 3 more songs till I kick your ass, pal." And Frey says, "Great, I can't wait." And then they played 3 more songs, smiling at the audience. Felder later wrote in his memoir that both of them were hissing at each other under their breath between every verse. The sound technicians, worried the crowd might hear it, lowered Frey's microphone so he had to lean in to sing. 3 more songs. The audience has no idea. And inside that band, it is already over. After the show, Felder smashed a guitar backstage, directly in front of Frey, and directly in front of the senator and his wife. A few days later, the band's producer called to check on the tour schedule. Small silence. There is no band at this time. Let me put this in context. The Eagles had spent the entire 1970s building something that almost nobody else managed to build. They had just made Hotel California. They were, not arguably actually, one of the most commercially successful bands in American history. And it ended with a singer counting down songs on stage before a backstage fight at a political fundraiser. Frey later said, We were just fried by then, man. That's the whole explanation. Sometimes the thing that ends a great band is exactly that large and exactly that small at the same time. And I know you have had a version of this experience, not in a band necessarily, in a room, at a table. Where you could feel something ending in real time and you could not stop it. The Eagles wrote a whole decade of music about California and dreams and the cost of staying too long. And in the end, they could not stay long enough. Number 7. The Police. The year is 1983. The Police have just released Synchronicity. It goes to number 1 in both the US and the UK. It sells 10 million copies. The BBC declares them the biggest band in the world. They win 3 Grammy Awards, including Song of the Year. Every Breath You Take sits at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 for 8 consecutive weeks. They play Shea Stadium. And at Shea Stadium, at the peak of all of it, Sting turned to Andy Summers after the show and said, "You know, it doesn't get any better than this. We should stop." And Summers said, "Yeah, we should." I find this almost incomprehensible. Most bands never get to one night like that. Most bands would take a decade of diminishing returns for 1 hour at Shea Stadium. The Police stood at the top of the mountain and decided, this is the summit. We've been here. Let's come back down. Part of it was Sting. He had been writing nearly all of the music. He found the 3-piece format limiting after years of pulling it as far as it could go. He had sounds in his head that the band's structure could not produce. And I will say this honestly, the recording of Synchronicity was, by multiple accounts, a nightmare. Members tracking in separate rooms to avoid each other. Physical arguments in the studio. Producer Hugh Padgham later said the whole album was one meeting away from never happening. So after the Synchronicity tour wrapped in March 1984, 105 shows, Sting walked. No official announcement, no farewell. Their manager kept it quiet, hoping they would get back together. A year of no comment. And then it became clear. The Police, at that specific moment the biggest rock band on the planet, were over. I want to be honest with you. I have thought about this one for years, because part of me understands it. There is something about knowing when to end. Something almost zen about walking away from the summit while you are still on it. But there is another part of me that looks at 3 musicians who were still making extraordinary things together, who still had so much fuel, and it hurts. Number 6. Motley Crue, February 10th, 1992. Motley Crue, coming off Dr. Feelgood, their highest-charting, best-selling album, the record that proved they could survive the glam era and come out the other side at number 1, called a meeting. And at that meeting, 3 members voted the same way, and Vince Neil was out. The official press release said he had left because car racing had become a priority in his life. Neil, on Dennis Miller's talk show 2 days later, described it differently. 2 days after my birthday, like, "Happy birthday, Vince." He said he was completely blindsided. 75% of the band voted him out. And I want you to understand the context. It is early 1992. Nirvana had just changed everything. The entire landscape of rock is being renegotiated in real time. And Motley Crue's answer was to fire the face of the band and bring in a replacement named John Corabi, a singer with a heavier, rawer, grungier sound. And the reasoning, in the moment, made a sideways kind of sense. If the sound is changing, change with it. Except Elektra Records had committed $25 million to a Motley Crue album. Not a rebranded band, not a new project, a Motley Crue album. The 1994 self-titled record with Corabi was, commercially, their worst ever release. The tour that had been arenas and stadiums shrank to clubs and theaters. A representative from the label eventually put it to Corabi directly. He said, "I don't care if Paul McCartney was fronting this band. It's not what they paid for. They want Vince Neil, or they're doing nothing." Corabi later recalled the whole thing with a clarity that honestly deserves some credit. He said, "My record was the first one they did that didn't go platinum, didn't make some crazy noise, and everybody panicked." And he also said, and this line has stayed with me, "The album would have made it under a different band name." And you know what? He is probably right. The music on that record was genuinely good. The problem was not the album. The problem was the decision to fire the voice that defined a decade of that band's identity, at the exact moment the world was already changing underneath them. Vince Neil came back in 1997, but the momentum of Dr. Feelgood, the real, specific, unstoppable momentum of that record, never returned in quite the same form. One meeting, one vote, one call they spent 5 years trying to take back. Number 5. The Clash. Here is the thing about Mick Jones that I genuinely cannot get past. In 1983, The Clash were on the edge of becoming the biggest band in the world. Combat rock, Rock the Casbah, Should I Stay or Should I Go? They played the 1983 US Festival, the same bill as David Bowie and Van Halen, to more than 140,000 people. They had gone from punk upstarts in 1976 to actual legitimate stadium rock, and Jones was a significant reason why. He wrote the melodies, he sang the hooks. He was the half of the Strummer-Jones partnership that made the songs climb radio. And in September 1983, Joe Strummer and bassist Paul Simonon fired him. The official statement said Jones had drifted away from the original idea of the group. Strummer was more direct later. "We had to change the team because the atmosphere was too terrible. We got so much work to do that we can't waste time begging people to play the damn guitar." Simonon, who had stopped speaking to Jones entirely, put it even more plainly, "We felt we'd had enough. Let's kick him out, and that's what we decided on. And to hell with the consequences." To hell with the consequences. I keep coming back to that phrase. Those are the words of a man who knew there would be consequences and chose to proceed anyway. And the consequences were exactly what any reasonable observer would have predicted. The Clash made one more album, 1985's Cut the Crap. A record Strummer would essentially disown. British critics called it one of the most disastrous albums ever released by a major artist. The band broke up shortly after its release. Years later, and this is the line I mentioned earlier, the one I promised you. Strummer said something he clearly meant. Whatever a group is, it is the chemical mixture of those 4 people that makes a group work. That's a lesson everyone should learn. You don't mess with it. He figured it out. It just took too long. Jones went on to form Big Audio Dynamite, which scored a hit almost immediately. Strummer and Jones eventually reconciled. They actually played together a few weeks before Strummer's death in December 2002. And I find something genuinely poignant about that. They found their way back to each other in the end. They just could not find their way back to the band. Number 4. Rage Against the Machine, October 18th, 2000. Zach De La Rocha posted a statement. The key line, "I feel that it is now necessary to leave Rage because our decision-making process has completely failed." And just like that, one of the most combustible bands in rock history was over. 9 years. From 1991 to 2000, Killing in the Name, Bulls on Parade, Wake Up, a band that made music with the physicality and political urgency of a fist, and it ended with a press release. Here is the thing about Rage Against the Machine that I did not fully appreciate until I started looking at this closely. They'd apparently been fighting about everything for years. Everything. Tom Morello described it later with a kind of exhausted clarity. There was so much squabbling over everything, and I mean everything. We would even have fistfights over whether our t-shirts should be mauve or camouflaged. And I understand that is partly funny. You just smiled. I know you did, because I did too when I first read it. But sit with it for a second. Because that is also a portrait of a band with so much internal fire that nothing, not success, not political alignment, not the fact that they were genuinely one of the best live acts in the world, could contain it. De La Rocha wanted an extended break from the band. His bandmates wanted to keep working. There was the 2000 MTV VMAs incident where Tim Comerford climbed a 15-foot stage prop while Limp Bizkit accepted an award and refused to come down. Which publicly humiliated De La Rocha and may have been the last straw. And underneath all of it were creative disagreements that went much deeper than t-shirt colors. They reunited at Coachella in 2007 to one of the most celebrated festival performances of the decade. They never made another studio album together. A reunion tour in 2022 ended when Zach tore his Achilles tendon. In January 2024, it was announced they would not be touring or playing live again. 3 studio albums, a sound that nobody has ever fully replicated, and they could not agree on what color to wear. Number 3, Soundgarden. Soundgarden formed in Seattle in 1984. Over the following decade and change, they went from a 3-piece playing small Pacific Northwest clubs to one of the biggest and most critically respected bands in the world. Super Unknown in 1994 debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and produced 2 Grammy-winning singles, Black Hole Sun and Spoon Man. That was the kind of band they were. They headlined Lollapalooza twice. They sold 20 million albums. In 1996, they released Down on the Upside, a deliberate departure. Lighter in places, more experimental. Kim Thayil wanted the heavier, riff-driven approach the band had built their identity on. Cornell wanted to push the sound somewhere new. The sessions were strained. The subsequent tour was worse. Drummer Matt Cameron said later that Soundgarden was eaten up by the business. The final concert in Honolulu on February 9, 1997, ended early when bassist Ben Shepherd, after suffering an equipment failure, threw his bass into the air in frustration and stormed off the stage. Cornell came back out alone and finished the set by himself. On April 9, 1997, A&M Records issued a terse press release. Soundgarden had mutually and amicably disbanded to pursue other interests. After 12 years. Here is what makes this one genuinely difficult for me. Cornell later said he was proud of how they ended it. He said, "Down on the Upside was one of my favorites, and we walked away then. How great is that? We had integrity, so why fuck with it?" And I want to respect that. There is something real in it. There is something almost beautiful about knowing when to walk. But I also know that the decision to end the band came in the friction of a tour that ran too long, sessions that grew too strained, and a final show that ended with a bass throw and a solo encore. That is not a dignified artistic choice. That is exhaustion. And there is a difference. They reunited in 2010 and released King Animal in 2012. And then Chris Cornell died on May 18, 2017. And whatever was left of the possibility ended there. Number 2, Van Halen, 1978. Van Halen's debut album. One of the great debut albums in the history of rock, maybe in the top handful ever made. Eruption, Running with the Devil, You Really Got Me. The world had not heard guitar like that before. And David Lee Roth, charismatic, physical, hilarious, completely impossible to ignore, was exactly the right vessel for it. 7 years, 6 records, 1978 to 1984. Then in January 1985, Roth released Crazy from the Heat, 4 cover songs, a solo EP, and he went on every talk show he could find to say Van Halen was not breaking up, and he mostly meant it. But around the same time, he told Billboard something that reads, "In hindsight, like a farewell. Since my very first days with the band 11 years ago, I have always had the feeling that one day I would wake up in a cold hotel, all the rooms would be empty, and I would be stuck by a phone with a busy signal." From the first day, nothing has changed, end quote. The 4-song EP was also supposed to be the beginning of a movie, a semi-autobiographical picture starring Roth about a rock star named Dave. He asked Eddie Van Halen to write the score. Eddie said no. And that refusal, according to Eddie, was the final straw. He told Rolling Stone, "The band as you know it is over. Dave left to be a movie star." Roth says he quit. Eddie says he left for Hollywood. Nobody agrees. To this day, and neither version makes the outcome less final. Sammy Hagar replaced Roth in late 1985. Van Halen made 4 more #1 albums. Commercially, they were better than fine. Baby, just how you feel. But if you have ever heard Roth on Hot for Teacher, if you have ever heard that specific, unrepeatable chaos and joy, you already know what I am going to say. Some combinations cannot be reconstructed. Some chemistry lives only in the original room. Roth and Eddie Van Halen never fully resolved their history with each other. Eddie died in October 2020, and that door is closed now. Number 1, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, 1987. The best-selling debut album in American history. 30 million copies worldwide. Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child O' Mine, Paradise City. A band, Axl Rose, Slash, Izzy Stradlin, Duff McKagan, Steven Adler. That felt like a force of nature, something you could not have engineered. Too volatile, too specific, too alive to have been designed. The opening riff of Welcome to the Jungle is still one of the most recognizable 4 seconds in rock history. Steven Adler was fired in July 1990 during the recording of Use Your Illusion. His addiction had made sessions unworkable. Izzy Stradlin walked in November 1991 on the eve of the album's release, citing what he called complications that became such a part of daily life in Guns N' Roses. And then, and this is the moment I want you to hold on to, at some point during the Use Your Illusion tour, Axl Rose is said to have issued an ultimatum. "Sign the Guns N' Roses name over to me, or I don't go on tonight." Slash later said it happened during the Barcelona show in July 1993. That they signed under duress because the alternative was a canceled show in front of a sold-out arena. Axl has denied this version of events. But what is not in dispute is what happened in the years that followed. Slash left in October 1996. Matt Sorum was fired in June 1997. Duff McKagan departed in August of the same year. By late 1997, Axl Rose and keyboardist Dizzy Reed were the only members remaining from the lineup that recorded Use Your Illusion. And then came the silence. Years of near silence. The most anticipated, most delayed, most mythologized recording project in rock history. Chinese Democracy. A revolving cast of musicians. A guitarist named Buckethead who performed in a KFC bucket and played with a technical precision that was somehow simultaneously astonishing and completely wrong for this band. An estimated $14 million spent on a record that was, by some accounts, recorded and scrapped and re-recorded completely. And in November 2008, 17 years after Use Your Illusion, the last proper studio album the classic lineup ever made, Chinese Democracy arrived. I have my own feelings about that record. You probably have yours, but I want to say something about what was actually lost that cannot be recovered on any album. Not the songs, the chemistry, the specific thing that happens when five people, those five people, in that specific combination, get into a room together. Axl's voice / his tone, Izzy's swing, Duff's locked-in foundation. That is not something you can reconstruct with $14 million and a decade and a half of studio time. And somewhere in those years, I believe Axl Rose knew that. Here is the other part of this story, and I think it matters. The Not in This Lifetime tour in 2016 Axl / and Duff back together, no new album, just the original songs, became one of the highest-grossing concert tours in the history of live music. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Sold-out stadium after sold-out stadium. The audience had not forgotten. The audience had been waiting for 25 years, which tells you everything about what the original band was worth, and everything about what was lost when one person decided that controlling the name mattered more than protecting the chemistry.